Our planet's in need of CPR, basically, and so it's all hands on deck. Every profession, every discipline needs to contribute to sustainability.
Welcome everybody to this week's show, which is the star is Mr. Benjamin K, aka Biological Maniac, aka best marine biology high school teacher, college teacher I've met. He's got a master's, studied gobies on the Great Barrier Reef, and I am so excited to have you here with my co-host and best friend Ian Somerhalder. So we want to learn about what you do with the students, and we want to really just give you a big applause for the work that you do. So Ian,
yes, we
just
do.
Jump right in here, man. We want
Please.
Well, let me start out by thanking you, Dr. Stone and Ian, for all your work too. It's great to be here.
It's really great to have you here, man. Again, what we were just talking about, it's the future of the world, whether it be from consumer behavior to voter behavior to academic behavior, but real on the ground actionable behavior is coming from youth. And you have focused on that and zeroed in on it and are doing it at such a level. This is about you. You have the floor.
Wow, well, thank you again, Ian, for all your work, and I love what your foundation is doing. And I think it's that time the scientists are screaming at the top of their lungs saying, you know, our planet's in the need of CPR, basically. And so it's all hands on deck. Every profession, every discipline needs to contribute to sustainability. And since young people spend, you know, a very big chunk of their time in a classroom with mentors, it's critically important that teachers and schools and school districts start transforming students and teaching them how to think critically, and also teaching them the elements of sustainability at large.
But marine biology...
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. Marine biology in high schools is kind of new, isn't it?
No, there've been, I guess it depends where you live. The marine biology is something that lots of schools locally around the Los Angeles County area and further south and further north have had, but it's usually an elective science. And so it's a great subject to launch all these different environmental investigations and infuse project-based learning, service learning strategies, especially with the close proximity that we have at Santa Monica High School to the ocean. It wouldn't be just if we didn't have a marine biology program, because the school and the ocean are so close to one another.
I'm gonna tip my cards on my age here now, but when I went to college, they didn't even have marine biology textbooks yet.
Really?
Yeah, marine biology.
I guess there wasn't.
No, it's a very recent science. It really didn't get going until like the 1960s, is when marine science kind of kicked in. And my marine biology introductory class in college was a bunch of scientific reprints that our professors stapled together, and we would read science papers and talk about it. There was no textbook on marine biology when I went to college in the late 70s. So for me to hear, and I came and spoke to your class last week. That's why you're on the show now, because I was so. Actually, what happened is at the end of the class, Ian, I said to all the students, I said, "Listen, I got this podcast. Who should I have on? Give me some suggestions. I wanted to know." And they all said, Mr. K, which is what they call
him.
So here he is. And do you teach anything else besides marine biology?
Yeah, I teach biology, environmental science, and I like to think that all of my classes have a kind of a sustainability theme. I'm very fortunate also to teach at Santa Monica College at nighttime.
Yep.
So I get a mix of all ages, and it's great to be with you know, the young kids at the high school and the older kids at the college level.
He gets to see where they're going and where they're coming from. So you have both sides of the spectrum. Actually, you have both sides of the rainbow, because hopefully below both of them there's pots of gold. You know.
Yeah, but talking about marine biology as a new science, I guess comparing our ages, it's a relative thing. I was very fortunate to have a mentor in high school, a marine biology teacher, Ray Millette, who inspired me so much and got us out testing water quality and taking samples of things, going to the Biono wetlands and taking a look at invasive species and degraded ecosystems, and that his class switched me on to marine biology, and I took his class even though it catered to ninth graders. I was a senior at the time, and I took his class for fun because I had already been surfing and fishing locally. Grew up in Los Angeles, and so I was already intrigued with the ocean, and then he just connected the dots with some of the scientific principles and the environmental service learning elements. And then I was off. I was inspired. I went to get my degree at UC Santa Barbara in aquatic biology. And then I went on to study in Australia for 4 years for my master's.
Gobies, right?
Wow.
Gobies. But
Yeah.
while I was there, it was interesting because I was at UNESCO. I happened to be on Heron Island, Great Barrier Reef, and UNESCO was happening, and I walked into a room, and all the scientists, very prestigious scientists to this day, were all around a projector on the, a screen. A PowerPoint presentation was being shown on how coral reefs are predicted to all be bleaching and disappearing in the next 50 years. And this was back in 2001. And so that was a big aha moment where I started connecting, okay, science, there's components of that, we have vast degradation of coral reefs happening, and then slowly over the last couple decades, I've kind of seen just the perfect storm of all these global issues and local issues kind of interacting. So we've got
Coming together in a really profoundly gnarly way.
yeah, dire, very very gloomy forecasts again, and then to see the scientists coming and reaching these consensus, right, that they do, and they say, hey, we need to respond to the science in this way, and then to see their science systematically ignored has been really hard for me to stomach. And
Them too.
yeah. I've been very pleased, though, that scientists, instead of just being objective reporters nowadays, a lot of them are taking it upon themselves to communicate their data with people and the media. And it's unfortunate, media has their interplay with what the science says, but I'm really happy that there are scientists who are just, let's cut to the chase. Here's the scientific report. This is what it says. Politicians, I hope you go make the right decisions. Here, media, here's a copy. I hope you represent this well. And I'm now going to go on YouTube and tell everyone exactly what it means. So this is kind of like the age of the new scientist, I think. And,
Right.
and Greg, you've done a tremendous job doing some of that work too with your books and papers.
Thanks. Yeah, it has been. There's been a turning point in the last 10 years. And I'm on the board of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and
Which is an amazing.
Yeah.
it's an amazing organization. It's famously where my favorite character, Matt Hooper in Jaws.
Hooper!
Hooper! More to port, Hooper! Went. I mean, he came from in that storyline. But, I've seen that institution just pivot. And they've asked me for actually help in pivoting to make their work applicable to decision makers. Because it was anathema. It's been anathema to scientists to have a position, to have an opinion about how their science should be used, because there's this old idea that it'll contaminate the purity of the science. Well, listen everybody, it is too late. There's too much going on right now. We don't have that luxury anymore. Scientists need to get out in front of their science and tell the story the way it is and begin to direct, where we're going to go. And with your students, you said sustainability, and I know you do don't you engage your students, like make them go out into the real world as part of their studies? And tell me about that.
Engaging students is something that I've been trying to refine over the years and master, and I'm still not there yet, but I've got a lot of elements down, and it kind of, I draw upon some old quotes. One, I think it was Jacques Cousteau, who said, we only protect what we love. And then his son, Jean-Michel Cousteau.
And we only love what we understand.
And then, yes, exactly. And,
Right.
and then Jean-Michel Cousteau came along
We
and
only
says,
understand
well,
what we see.
Papa
Yeah.
Smurf, Well, we actually we protect what we understand, and so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reconnect students with nature by sending them out on field trips, going camping, going to the beach, seeing nature, experiencing, doing the science projects in nature, sending them out into the community to connect to community, and also bring in experts into the classroom.
Can you give us an example, like one of your student projects?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've done numerous projects over the years. One that really stands out, though, is we became very passionate right when I started my career about single-use plastics, and particularly in Santa Monica, the city had already kind of addressed expanded polystyrene, aka styrofoam. But plastic bags were still a blight across streets and freeways and on the beach and even in the water. I was fishing and catching plastic bags. Jeez. And so our city was starting to think about things, but there wasn't really any profound wave of change that was crashing and pushing pushing the city council to do something. So the students came along and they started investigating the issue scientifically, which I always encourage my students to do. Let's try to understand the problem or understand the best solution to the problem using science. Let's investigate it scientifically, and then let's do science-informed healing of sorts. And so
I like that, healing.
Yeah, healing.
And so we started investigating the number of plastic bags and various pollutants on our local beach. And that showed us, okay, this is ridiculous. The plastic bags are everywhere. And so the students said, okay, well let's do something. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? They're like, let's march. I was like, whoa, that sounds like a pretty bold idea. And here I was in my early career, not worried about anything, or I was in the honeymoon period with my administration and in the community, and so I really had free reign to do all kinds of things. And now I have to be a bit more cautious because there's a lot of liability issues. Right. But we started marching, and there was one march turned into 6 marches.
Like advocacy marching.
Advocacy marches, and the students
with posters,
huge signs, and
signs.
All of a sudden my students are filming it, and Teen Nickelodeon is out there, and the
awesome.
news and everything, and it turned into students donning costumes in City Hall in front of the city council and saying, we need to get rid of these plastic bags, and here's our data on what we found. And so it took longer than we thought, because the plastics industry and reps of the plastic industry, the American Chemistry Council, they came in, and there was Save the Plastic Bag Coalition. There we go. Save the Plastic Bag Coalition came in and threatened a lawsuit against our city if we were to move forward with a ban. And so we had to do an environmental impact report, and so that was really, it took some time, but the students stayed with it. They kept advocating, and to this day, city council members still come up to me and say, Ben, why we have this? We have a ban on single-use plastic bags, and we ended up being, I think, the 8th municipality in California to do it. It's because your students, came and really made it known what they wanted.
Well,
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks for giving them the ability to do that.
I'm a facilitator, and I keep them. I try to define a bar, a standard of excellence for them, and hold them to that. But they really, at the end of the day, are the agents of change. I can get up and speak in front of city council, and they just nod, okay. But as soon as the youth get up there and they say, hey, here's our science, here are our data sets, this
well,
is,
as an educator, you are a facilitator. You're a facilitator of the exchange of information and science to an open sponge-like brain that either has the ability to act upon it, or to be inspired by it and then act upon it. But then you facilitate their need and desire to do that. You give them the tools. So that, I think, for any teacher, for me, why I was so excited about this episode was for teachers out there, what you think about, so LA Unified School District, right? is something like 30,000 teachers or something. It's huge. 'Cause I remember when we were doing a big thing with Thrive Market, we were giving memberships to Thrive to LA Unified.
Something like
teachers.
over 1,000 schools. It's big.
It's big.
Yeah.
Now, think about that's just in this area.
Right.
So imagine the amount of educators across the country who, for lack of better terms, have just been pounding the pavement and sort of beating their heads against the wall, trying to communicate this to their students and inspire them, right? Because with youth, it's about, like what we talked about before in our episode together, which is when you talk to someone who's young and you ask them, what is it that makes you tick? What is it that makes the sun come up and go down twice before you ever even knew time was elapsed? And when you find that thing, right?
It's the why, right?
It's the why and then the how.
Yeah.
And one thing that I forgot to mention, which I'm glad we're doing it on this one.
Yeah.
All any of us want, whether you're a scientist, an educator, an entertainer, filmmakers, whatever it is, all we want in life is to find purpose.
Right.
But purpose
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
think about it though. Purpose is an incredibly elusive thing. What is the equation to find purpose? Everyone wants purpose in our lives. I've found, and what I think the equation for purpose is when you marry skill with passion. So if you're passionate about something and you develop a skill set for it, you've ultimately found your purpose. Now there may be multifaceted levels of that throughout your life.
Ian, it's porpoise.
Porpoise, exactly. Sorry. Duh. But you know what I mean? Helping young people or adults find purpose is, I think, single-handedly one of the greatest gifts you can give to society.
Well said.
Well,
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And to piggyback on that idea, I think that a lot of layman people and students, they've been brought up in a way their parents may shelter them in certain ways from some of the bad things going on in the world. And I think by the time they get to middle school and high school, it's time for teachers and the district message to be, hey, we've got a lot of challenges before us, and we need to start instilling the conservation ethic in young people and literally teach them about what's going on, right?
Right.
Because most of them don't know there's deforestation, desertification, climate change, ocean acidification, ocean dead zones, climate change, overfishing, shark finning, and all these things going on and interacting. And then, of course, there's the socio-political, economic factors associated with that. And it's just, it's a complex thing, but they need to understand what's happening because we can't fix what we don't understand, right?
Right.
And so my hope is that educators will step up. I'm hoping to get educators freed to teach about what's going on, and also put a big spotlight, at least 50% or more of the spotlight on the solutions to these things. We need the school district.
75%, which is what we were talking about. That's what you said earlier. It can't all be doom and gloom. This is about hope, right? This is about hope. Even this even this segment is about hope.
Absolutely, but I have one bone to pick with hope, and I
you and me
hope,
both.
Hope is I want us to be optimistic, and I don't want people to say it's all over and the world's going kaput and we've run out of time and go out to the nearest bar and
we're teetering
enjoy your last.
We're teetering on the brink of that, but
hurrah.
we need to inspire action because of that.
Yes. But I often tell my students, hope is meaningless, action is everything at this point.
Yes.
And I think that's really the key. And
so it's not inspire hope or to give hope, it's to inspire action.
Well,
I think that's
a much better way of putting it.
And it's to take this seriously and realize how deep down this hole we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Banning plastic bags and plastic bags happen to be, I think, 30 or 40% of the plastic that's in the ocean. That's quite a large percentage. So it's great to get that taken care of, but we've got to keep going, man. We've got to cut down on the carbon emissions. We've got to make sure that the seafood that we we eat is correct. We've got to make sure the next coastal development that goes hotel is done the right way, all that stuff. I want people not to stop at the plastic bag. They've got to.
You reminded me of another one of our projects that we did, which was in 2009, I get a phone call and they said, Mr. K, we have a child who goes to Santa Monica High School, and we heard that you're crazy. You were building some sort of solar boats or something last year. I'm like, oh, well, thank you for the compliment. And that was very, very nice. They're like, we want to give you a 1971 red convertible VW Super Beetle. And I was like, okay, thank you. There's one condition. You've got to turn that with your students. You guys got to do some, turn it into a green car. I was like, okay. So we get this car. We receive this beautiful red car, which we would later name Volts Watson and VW. And
That's awesome.
over 4 years, we got funding. We got the technological know-how from experts. And one of my students in particular was really savvy, only talked in ohms, watts, and amps, and got this car to run on freeway-worthy, 100-mile range car, all-electric plug-in. That ended up being in shows and on television and newspapers all across the U.S. And that was like a turning point because we were,
cool.
Plastics are one
my
thing.
hero.
Yeah, he's my hero too.
Well, no. Yeah,
That's cool.
Easy. We're gonna have a hero.
Cut
fight in a minute, all right?
cut to.
Cut to.
So-
they killed the
you
electric
Take
car.
5.
Yeah, so you transformed this car. And
Well, I
The
did it.
students
I
did.
didn't actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the students.
You gave
did.
them the opportunity.
I had no idea. I've never taught physics or anything like that before. I had no idea what I was doing. But, I learned that I could help in the, I don't know, you call it a producer, a production, helping connect dots.
Facilitator.
Hey,
Yeah.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Everybody always, one of the perennial questions is, what is art? And everybody's got a different interpretation. What is science? Give me a definition of science, because you teach science, and we hear it all the time now that science is king, and we got to pay attention to it. And how for our listeners and even for me, I'm just curious, how do you define science?
Well, I usually define the scientific method for my students, which is it's a way of studying phenomenon that occur in our world, and it's a system of thinking, and it's a system of protocols that we use to address our questions. And it used to be that scientists would be studying the natural environment and counting hairs on the back of some worm's rear end, and really, trying to understand ecosystems and how they work. And I've now turned science not just into a way to study nature, but also a way to understand the anthropogenic impact, and also using science to understand the best solutions to our ecological footprints. So that's my definition of science.
It's a good one.
That's a great one.
One that I'll share with you that I'll give to people is I say it's a system of rules that keeps us from lying to each other.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
And it's a storytelling, really. A lot of young students and people come to me and say, "Oh, geez, I wish I could get a master's degree or a PhD, but it looks like so much work. I'm not smart enough," and all this kind of stuff. And I'm going, listen, all you're doing is telling a story, and you're telling it with a set of rules to make sure that the story you tell is truthful.
And it's self-correcting in that sense.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you do a study and you come out with a published result, I've taught my students that they shouldn't just accept that. Scientists check each other.
Right.
And it's that rule. It keeps us honest, like you were saying. So if someone's come out with something and they say something, climate change doesn't exist, well, it's upon scientists to check each other.
Right.
And we keep each other in check until we arrive at consensus. And once a consensus is reached, well, then that hypothesis now turns into a theory. And a theory, a lot of people think they don't understand really what theories are, but theories are, gravity's a theory, and we all trust that when we drop something, it's going to go down. And unless you're maybe out of your mind, maybe it will go down, but maybe some people see it go up. But
Right.
it's a way of understanding our world and also keeping it honest. I like that.
Yeah,
that's a really unique system of rules that
it's a system
us
of
from
rules
lying
that
to
keeps
each
us
other.
from lying to each other. And
it's amazing.
and in this day and age, we have a lot of science. There's been a system of rules applied to telling a story about what's happening to our planet. And let's talk about the atmosphere for one thing. On the one hand, I can't believe that there's anybody that doubts the fact that we've sent all the CO2 into the atmosphere from burning fossil fuels and it's heating the planet up.
It's all bullshit, Greg.
It's
The science is not finalized on that.
It's a theory.
It's such a clear story. But on the other hand, to me, it's like a triumph of science because it's an odorless, colorless gas that is around us all the time, and the preponderance of people and leaders and everybody does agree and understand it. So that on the one hand, it's crazy that people don't get it, but on the other hand, I mean, it's a pinnacle of science because it's a hard thing you can't see it. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but it's all carbon dioxide, which is the primary greenhouse gas. Of course, we know there's methane in it.
Methane's even scarier because it's what is it?
It's
how many times?
20 or 40 times more. What do you
It's
probably?
It's 23 times
23,
more potent in the first 20 years, I think, and then by the time you get up to 100 years, it becomes 83 times more potent. So it's there's lots of different things on the internet about that. Or sorry, I may have it reversed. I think it might be 80 some odd times more potent in the first 20 years. And then
Water vapor is a greenhouse gas.
Actually,
it has a short life, but it's a greenhouse gas. And one thing I've begun to redefine what the ocean is, and I tried it out with when I spoke to your class a couple weeks ago. I don't know if it's stuck or not, Ian, but I look at the ocean as being the whole hydrological cycle. We tend to think of the ocean just when it's in the ocean basins, and I call that's the salty part.
Right.
But the ocean then evaporates up into the clouds, and every 33,000 years, approximately the whole volume of the ocean evaporates up into clouds, goes over, falls down on rain, comes down through the streams and the mountains, and then goes back to the salty part. But the ocean is the whole system. And like today, it's raining outside, so I like to say today the ocean's coming down as rain. Did that stick at all, or was there any discussion about that afterwards? Or
yeah, no, I love that, and it reminded me when you were going through that the other day in the class about how there are solutions to urban runoff and other types of runoff by cutting the water cycle in half and doing what countries like Singapore are doing, which is using recycled water. When you flush the toilet, it can actually be made incredibly pure, and we can use that water directly, and we're going to need to also start thinking about fresh water itself, because our freshwater supply is, with climate change, is dwindling, as you know. So yeah, it's all connected, as are all the other, the nitrogen, the carbon cycle. All of these things are cycling, and again, I think when more people understand that, especially young people, and they realize it's a reasonably simple thing. And we've got carbon going up. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to put a cap on that carbon. We need to reduce it. And if we can do that, then we can actually mitigate this problem and its worst effects, keep the warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And if we can do that, we may avoid the worst effects of climate change.
what's one of the most profound, happiest, satisfying moments you've had in your teaching career? If you could
There have been many.
Pick one or two, just quickly.
Many.
I'm just curious.
But a couple years ago, I was so jazzed because
You know what?
yeah.
Don't kill. I'm gonna have to see this in the edit.
Yeah.
I have a flood issue at my house.
Okay.
My wife and I live up in Malibu,
Sure,
and our generator's down and our power's not working. So the pumps that I have, because all my drains are backed up outside.
Should I
You got to
keep
get
talking?
back to. No, you have to.
Okay.
So grateful for you, man. Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thanks
you.
for
Why
all
don't we
of it.
just
This isn't the last.
And by the
Hey,
way,
thank you, Ian.
climate change means more unpredictable weather like we're having today.
See you guys all later.
Okay,
And-
take care, brother. Love you. Yeah, so just curious, as a teacher, which I think is one of the most important roles in society, we don't celebrate it enough. What's it like for you? What's it like inside? Tell me, give me some high points. I also want to hear about some low points.
Sure. Well, there have been a lot of high points. And fortunately, I've had probably more high points than low points in my career. But there was a time a couple years ago when I had, instead of just having my Team Marine group do the real science, the real nitty-gritty science to get the data to affect positive change at, from the grassroots up or the top down. I got all of my students doing sustainability projects that lasted over a semester. And so these were long-term projects where students had to select an issue that they were interested in that related to sustainability, investigate the issue using science, collect data, and then somehow learn from their data, leverage their data to affect positive changes in their school or greater community. And so after the culmination of this project was really the high for me, because I told the students that, hey, there is a Board of Education meeting coming up, and we have an opportunity to go and tell the Board of Education for the city of Santa Monica, we need change. We need our school to be propagating environmentally literate kids once they graduate, and that should be part of our mission statement. And I told the students this, and after spending 6-7 months studying their issues, they were all on board. They got it. They actually, more than just showing a film about the environment, more than me going on one of my environmental rants, which I've been known to do, and crying because of the war on science on the front page of National Geographic. The students were actually seeing that they could actually be part of the solution, a viable part of the solution. And they said, okay, let's take our science to the advocacy level. And we had 120 students and parents collectively show up to a Board of Education meeting because sustainability was one of the topics on the agenda. And we had, of those 120, 70 students and community members, stakeholders from the community, got up to express what they wanted to see happen within our school district. And when we got there, we had a plan, which was, okay, what do we really need? How do we, if we have 18 schools in our school district, we're not as large as LAUSD, but how do we get our school district to really do something meaningful that's going to be long-lasting and not just lip service to sustainability and getting it out. And so we said, hey, we have some common asks. We would like sustainability to be put in the mission statement of our school district so that every child who graduates and moves on from our school district has that conservation ethic and wants to be a steward and solve these crises that we see before us. And then 2, we need a sustainability committee formed by all stakeholders, including teachers, principals, superintendents, you name it. Let's get a committee together that will look at the low-lying fruit and the high-lying fruit and create a plan, set goals, and hold ourselves accountable to. And then 3, we need a sustainability director for our school district. And that director would actually have some power to work with the committee, work in helping get the education services on board with getting curricula out that teachers could use to replace those old units with something fresh that relates to the current situations going on our planet. And so that's it. The sustainability, we have the mission statement change. We've got the committee, and now we have someone inside the school district that's really helping coordinate all of these efforts.
Do you ever get any pushback from like parents or anybody that you're like, hey, you're taking my kid into an area that doesn't agree with my political precepts?
You know, I often have told people that I'm very fortunate to live in Santa Monica and teach at two Santa Monica schools, Samo High and SMC, and that I probably would have been fired in several other districts.
That's what I was thinking.
Because I'm trying to show the truth, Greg.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get students to realize that we don't have a lot of time left. And sometimes, you know, I think there have been a few parents, one in particular who was very, very nasty and came to me and said, you know, you're trying to indoctrinate our kids, and then, you know, they actually lodged a formal complaint about me, and the principal calls me and says, Ben, there's been a complaint. I'm like, oh no. And you know, they were asking, the principal at the time said, we want to make sure that you're teaching climate change in a neutral way. And I said, okay, how do you mean?
Who said that? The teacher or the?
No, this was my principal.
The principal,
who,
okay, yeah.
We want you to teach climate change in a neutral way. I'm like,
what does that mean?
A neutral way. The consensus about climate change has been out for a while. It's in my textbook. It's right here, and it talks about it and what we need to do and solutions. And I'm teaching science. And I felt at the time that person really didn't understand how dire the situation is, and that there is a consensus out, and that there's irrefutable evidence that climate change not only is happening, but humans are the biggest cause that's contributing to it. And so I had to kind of explain myself to the principal, but I was supported. And I was very fortunate to be supported. But yeah, there was this one very conservative person.
To that point, this is where media and society errs at times on this issue.
Yeah.
Is they think that they want to be fair, which means represent all sides of the issue. But they think sometimes that, like, the consensus around climate change, that it's caused by us and that it's a dire forecast, is, you know, 99 point something % of all scientists believe this to be the case. There's that little teeny fraction that say no. Well, sometimes it's interpreted that means that, well, you need to give equal treatment to that little tiny
in the news,
percentage.
they see Bill Nye the Science Guy and
it's like,
some other
it's like
dude.
if you have a page in the New
Yeah.
York Times on, you know, science caused by people, there are those that say you need to have another page over here to represent that tiny fraction which disagrees with it.
Well, when the media poses it as a debatable issue and represents it as such, then people think that the science isn't settled. And that's been doing a lot of harm when you do have some media groups.
You know, I saw a great poster. It had somebody said it was like, I hear there's a debate around climate change. I don't recall there being a debate around E equals MC squared.
Yeah, right. Well, it's too bad that the scientific method has been questioned, and that you know, there are not enough people who are really plugged into what the scientific community is collectively saying. And that to me is it's now all hands on deck. Let's get a megaphone to the science.
Yeah.
And let's also remind scientists that they need to be part of the solution and be better communicators, right, with the general public. And teachers, I think, you know, if I get it, you know, all of us can have faith-based beliefs, teachers included, but we also need to pay homage to what the science says. It's empirical data. It's not something. It's like, hey, that couch over there is green. No, it's not yellow. It is green, and that's just a fact. And I liked how, what was it, John Oliver who said it's like debating climate change is like debating whether hats exist or if they're numbers that we count. And you know, it's just it gets to the point. It's very aggravating, but at the same time, when you show students, and this what I think is what wakes me up. This is my purpose, right? I want to show students what's happening, show them the truth. I want to show them that there is a war on science. I want to show them how the politics and the special interest groups have cast doubt on that science and have and have
the only I don't know how to describe it. I was going to say crack in the door or the window. The only thing that you can say is that in the past, and this is an argument that comes up, there has been intense periods of volcanism on the planet, which has emitted, high levels of CO2 into the atmosphere and caused, climate to change rapidly. And that's true. But that doesn't mean that what we're doing isn't true. But you'll often hear that argument put forward that, volcanism could do this. And that's true.
Volcanism, as you know, can also cool the planet. And usually after major volcanic eruptions, we've seen some global cooling because of the aerosols and the sulfur particles and the ash reflecting some of the UV radiation back to space. But there's one of the websites that I tell my students about is skepticalscience.com.
Yeah.
And I have my students, vet various references on all of these things and then try to arrive at sensible conclusions about, well, do you think the climate is changing? Is the ocean acidifying? Are we overfishing? And explore these topics a little bit, trying to also tell them as little about what I know. And I think when they arrive at it organically, that can be helpful. But it's a time of great worry. Greg,
yeah. I've been waiting for this my whole career for the world to come to this place, and I'm inspired that we see this in the Santa Monica High School, see it in you. You are my hero. You're one of my heroes.
Well, you're one of my heroes,
man. That's kind of you to say, but I'm serious. You're touching so many lives, and this podcast is also sponsored by the Aquarium of the Pacific.
Oh.
So that's another web of public education that's part of what needs to be done in our world.
I've taken my students to the Aquarium of the Pacific every year since I've been a teacher.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Except for last year, in all honesty.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, they're part of this. In fact, the camera crew that we're with today works for the Aquarium of the Pacific. And I kind of want to bring us back to port now. We've gone with Ian. We cast the lines. We headed out in some really interesting waters. But as we come back, what's your favorite marine animal? And you can't say gobies because I know you studied those for your master's degree, but just anything else, because everybody has to say the thing that they studied in their graduate work was their favorite. But what else? Tell me, just throw out another animal or genre or something.
Well, I did study fish. I'm an ichthyologist.
Okay.
Some people say an ichthyophile.
Yeah.
And so I love fish, and I've been mesmerized by so many different species, but I think one that I bump into a lot when I'm going surfing or when I'm in the water swimming around is an elusive one. It's called a corbina. And these corbina they're one of our local species, and they can be seen sometimes flopping on the shore because sometimes they forget to retreat with the receding tide or the retreating wave, and they can be 5 pounds. And as an angler, I enjoy catching them on very light tackle using sand crabs. And so when I was growing up, my aquatic playground was Will Rogers State Beach, and I would go down there. Someone showed me, 4 or 6 pound test, an 18-inch leader, little hook, and you mostly catch perch, right? Barred surf perch, they're called. But when you hook into a corbina on a light kind of trout fishing pole, it's like catching a tuna, out there on a boat. And,
all right.
and
well,
so
we'll make sure that we're going to put a link into information about corbina on the website for your episode. And
we were fishing for corbina and perch, and then one day my buddy, we were like 15, 16 years old, my buddy hooked into something we didn't know what it was, and we got it up to the surface after like a 20-minute battle, and it was a white sea bass, but at the time we thought it was a world record corbina because they look kind of similar. And the fish was so big, and we were fishing with such light line that we couldn't just pull the fish in. And so with all my clothes on, my boots and everything, and don't do this if you're watching this out there, ladies and gentlemen, but I jumped in, and with this big net into the water with all my clothes on, jacket, got saturated, got submerged underwater, and then the wave just kind of spits me up onto the shore, and I have this huge fish that's out of the net. I'm all drenched, you know, the waves are crashing on us, and my best friend was very happy with me.
Okay, well that's a great
fish
story.
That didn't get away.
And I learned something today about Corvina. I never knew about that. So will you come back on the show again sometime? I'd love to have you as a regular. Maybe bring some of your students next time too.
I'd be delighted to come back. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for the time.
All right, and thank you for all you do for conservation and protection of our ocean habitats.
I'm expecting your students to pick up the storyline from here. So thank you, listeners, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Don't just save the planet for the halibut.
And have a porpoise in life.
Have porpoise in life.
A porpoise in life,
yes.
yeah.
Do it for sharks.
All right.